Everyone, thanks for joining our webinar today. We are very excited to use the time to tell you more about our latest development, the SurveyCTO AI agent skill. As a preface, I think it's fair to say that good surveys, good data collection projects take time to build, as they rightly should. And historically, you needed a good amount of expertise to bring your desired result to life. And sometimes this expertise, could be a limiting factor for people. Maybe you weren't quite sure how best to use advanced survey logic or make a survey field look or act a certain way. And reducing and maybe even eliminating these situations are exactly why our team saw a real opportunity to use Gen AI to make survey and workflow design easier and faster for people. So our AI agent skill is the manifestation of that work, and we're excited to show you the possibilities you can use it for. So before we get into that, let me start by introducing our speakers. Joining us are Lawrence Lee and Amrit Cooper. Lawrence is the president and CEO of Dubility, the social enterprise behind SurveyCTO. He is intensely focused on making high quality data and technology in general more accessible to users. And it's his vision that really drives the rest of our focus on ways to deliver a better SurveyCTO experience for you all. Amrit is our director of enterprise success and works to make sure our users achieve what they set out to do, and also make sure that user needs and feedback help improve SurveyCTO. He's had a lot of experience in the data collection space, having formerly founded a survey research consultancy, as well as being involved in all stages of survey planning, field work, data analysis across many different project types, like social program evaluations or household studies or market research. And finally, my name is Shirley Sweeney, and I will be your moderator for today. And here is our agenda for today. We wanted to spend a little time on the history of data collection technologies and how we got to where we are today, followed by a primer, the conceptual overview on what AI agent skills and very relatedly MCP servers are to help you then understand our agent skill and MCP server. And then we will get into a demo and end with insights into our roadmap. As always, we'll have a dedicated Q&A section at the end. So with that, I will hand it off to Amrit to start.
Great. Thanks, Shirley, for the great introduction. So how did we get here? Well, over the decades, we've moved from manual data entry to mobile and digital data collection that started in the 2010s and is something that organizations are still working on today. Then, in the early 2020s, as the volume, velocity, and variety of data grew exponentially, in addition to organizations collecting data, they started needing to integrate and manage continuous data streams, making sense of that data, figuring out how to connect all of it into data silos. This is, of course, something that's easier said than done. So naturally, organizations are still working on that too. And most recently, in the past couple of years, with the advent of generative AI, came what is certainly the biggest leap forward in technology we've seen in decades. Not only does Gen AI allow us to help make sense of the data, its ability to do more than previous technology iterations make the promise of integration possible. So we can orchestrate, we can build, and the systems that we make are even more easily created than before. It's in this latest era that we at SurveyCTO saw the biggest potential to really leverage these new innovations, especially Gen AI, to put real practical tools right in your hands. And of course, I'm referring to the AI agent and MCP server. But before we get to that, within the context of SurveyCTO, let me take a moment to go over these as concepts. These technologies are fairly new, and so you either may not have gotten around to using them or had much time to understand them. So let me start with AI agents. AI agents powered by models like Claude, GPT, or Gemini are very capable, and they read a lot. They can write, they can reason, and yes, they also write code. But on day one in your organization, they don't know your tool specifically, they don't know your organization, and they don't know how you like things to be. A skill focuses that expertise, that raw ability, turn one of these agents from a generalist into a specialist on your topic. So moving on to MCP servers. What are they? Well, while skills can be used by themselves, they are also often combined with MCP or Model Context Protocol servers. MCP servers provide a suite of tools to AI agents so that when you're conversing with them, their output isn't simply telling you what they need to do. Their output actually does what you want it to do. Now, what does that mean in the SurveyCTO context? Well, let's consider that. So, as we saw recently, we've released the skill and paired MCP server to work together. This is the latest step in our work to make sure that survey design is easier and easier. Our AI tools and AI assistant were the first foray down this path, and this agent skill with the MCP server is a rapid follow-up to add to that value. So without much ado, let's walk you through how all of this works. I'd first start by downloading a desktop AI agent, for example, Claude Desktop or Cowork. I mention desktop specifically because that's what our skill is currently optimized for, not cloud-based agents. And while these desktop agents come with free levels of access, which means that everybody should be able to access them, you should check with your organization's policies around AI before you use them or our skill. Once I've downloaded a desktop agent, I might be perfectly happy with it because it provides really smart, good advice. But then I start to ask more SurveyCTO questions. And I find that the advice I'm getting on SurveyCTO is not specific enough, or it's just simply wrong when I try to apply the advice. So that's where the SurveyCTO skill comes in. The skill contains everything an agent needs to know about SurveyCTO. How a form is designed, how the survey choices and settings, worksheets fit together, the rules for adding expressions, what a field plugin should look like, and so on. Once you give an agent that skill, it stops being a general, albeit powerful helper and becomes a SurveyCTO specialist. When you're at this point, the agent plus skill is a pretty powerful duo. So you might ask, why do you need something like an MCP server? Well, like I went over on the last slide, MCP provides tools. It provides the ability for agents equipped with the skill to perform high quality actions on your behalf. You can think of it this way. If you asked me to divide some sheets of paper exactly in half, if I did it by hand, there'd be a lot of variation, imprecision in the output, tears here, it wouldn't quite line up. In contrast, if I had a tool like a guillotine to use, I could perfectly cut each sheet consistently using that tool. Now, similarly, an agent just with a skill, may be able to create a generic form to you. But that form might include inconsistencies resulting from an invalid design, whereas an agent with a skill and MCP server would not only be able to create the forms, field plugins for you, those forms and field plugins don't need any added tweaks or adjustments to get them to work on the SurveyCTO platform. It'll just work. Now, having gone over each of the components that work together, I'll share some examples of how you can use the skill. So we're going to work through each of these examples live today and see this done. In the first case, field plugin creation is incredibly fast and easy using the skill and MCP server combination. For anybody who is unfamiliar with field plugins are an open standard for customizing the data collection experience in SurveyCTO, providing custom alternative versions of existing plugins or creating brand new ways to interact with forms. But previously, you needed to have some level of developer skill or expertise to create and test field plugins. Well, that's changed recently. We're also going to do some form design using the XLS form template. So XLS form, it's a spreadsheet format for authoring SurveyCTO forms. But again, you don't need to even know that necessarily. You can explain to Claude what you want and say that you want it as a SurveyCTO form. We're also going to look at a case of introducing language localization into a form. It's a very common use. You might develop your form in English, for example, but need to deliver it in several other languages. You might have also had this experience, but I found that large language models translate very well between well understood human languages. So that is one of the jobs that the skill can do for you. Keep in mind, there are many other things that the skill and MCP can do as these models improve and as you learn more about desktop AI clients and plug in other tools that you use, you have a lot of discovery ahead of you. So with that in mind, let's move to the demo portion of our presentation. All of these clients are available on the product page of the given client that you might want to use. So you can go to the Claude site to download the Claude AI agent for your computer for free. But Claude is just an example. It's one we happen to like, and they have very capable models. But you could just as easily be using OpenAI's Codex platform for coding with AI locally on your computer. And for the even more adventurous, there are tools like OpenCode, which allow you to use whatever models that you like. But the point is, there are many options. Claude is just an example. We'll move to Claude in just a moment. But in terms of where to go to get your AI skill. So similar to field plugins, the team at SurveyCTO distributes the AI skill through a GitHub page. So if you're new to GitHub, don't worry. Please don't be scared of the list of files in the repository. You can just make your way down and start reading the README, which contains the full set of instructions. What I will do here is scroll down to this link. This is where you download our skill. Now, I've already done this. Somewhat excitingly, we have launched a new version of the skill only yesterday. But I've been preparing for the session with the previous version, so be prepared. You may have an even better experience than I'm able to show today. So make sure you have the file there. There's a full set of instructions, but I will be able to go over those with you while we are looking at the Claude desktop environment. So just a moment Welcome to Claude Desktop. So you will need to install Claude Desktop, but that's pretty straightforward these days. Tools like Claude Desktop will require an account, and you'll need to be logged in. I'm also already logged into my account. Now, as I was saying earlier, I could just get started, but we need to do some setting up. We've got to install our skill, connect our MCP, and make one small settings tweak. But all of these are one-time operations, and once you've done that, you're good to go. So let us get organized. So I'm going to click on the Customize button in the interface, and I'm going to click on Skills. So now I'm going to click on the plus button, and I'm going to upload a skill. So I'm just going to drag and drop the skill file from my computer into Claude. And we've uploaded SurveyCTO, which is great. So now the SurveyCTO skill is available. So if you are eager to be following the skill and getting better, you can see the version number here, and you can also follow the GitHub page for updates to make sure that you always know when a new version of the skill is ready for testing. Now MCP. For that, we go into connectors. You can see I have some other connections already. Now we want to drop in the address of our server. So I'm just going to quickly copy that to my clipboard. Once again, I'll click on plus. I'm going to add a custom connector. I'll paste in the address, and I'm going to call this SurveyCTO Tools as per the suggestion on the guide. Now, to make your life easier, we strongly recommend that you, especially as you get more comfortable, if you trust these tools, mark always allow. So, in other words, you can start Claude Desktop doing something, leave your desk, go make a cup of tea, and Claude will hopefully have finished its job as opposed to you returning with it asking you for permission to do something that you would almost certainly grant. So keep that in mind when you are configuring MCP. So out of the Customize menu, we're now going to go into settings to configure a security setting. So in settings, we're going to go into the capabilities menu. And at the bottom of capabilities, there's this setting, allow network egress. So we want this to be on. The default state is actually toggled off. So make sure that you have network egress on. Essentially, network egress allows Claude to interact with outside resources like packages and software libraries to improve its capabilities. You want to do this in a safe way, though. I mean, you could add all domains, but in this particular case, I'm going to add a particular domain for our MCP server to the allow list. There we go, done. So keep that in mind. This step is crucial for using the MCP server. If you don't do this, the skill will not be successful at leveraging the tools for your MCP server. So now we've installed the skill, MCP is configured, and Claude is allowed to access MCP thanks to this security tweak. Easy, and we are ready to get going. So let's talk a little bit about the user interface for Claude Desktop. So I expect by now you've at least had an interaction with ChatGPT in your browser. It is, I believe, the world's still most popular chat bot. Desktop agents are a little different. There is a chat interface, very much like what you're used to. Cowork is a little different. It's designed to work with files in a local folder, which you can build. and interact with. For those of you who are more developer curious, you can start to look at the code side of things. There's a lot to learn, and ultimately this is a SurveyCTO skill demo, so we won't focus overly on Claude capabilities. So, as promised, let's give this a try. So, to start with, we're going to build a field plugin. So this is a prompt that I've prepared. Now, because I'm pasting it in here, something important didn't happen, so I'll just do a quick little edit here. So very importantly, this forward slash, that is your syntax in the Claude chat for invoking things like skills. So because I created the space, I'm now allowed to properly invoke the skill. Now, this isn't necessarily strictly required. Claude and other AI agents are smart enough to know sometimes when you are talking about SurveyCTO that they should use SurveyCTO related skills. But I'm pausing before running this because that is a crucial detail. Now, a few other things: you can set a project folder. I'm just going to use default Claude storage. In fact, it's also close our sidebar so we can focus nicely on what we are doing. I'm asking Claude in general to act without asking, to just go ahead. If you're feeling more cautious the first time you do it, get it to ask for permissions. Importantly, I'm going with the latest Opus model, which is Anthropic's smartest model to date. We'll talk more about that later, but let's get this going. So I'll click to run this. Okay, so we have kicked things off. It's started to work. Let's make some observations about the process and the user interface. So Claude Desktop and other chat bot products for the desktop have a sort of an activity log. I would say it is important to have to pay some attention to what's going on here, because there will be prompts sometimes. Also, this might happen sometimes, which is actually a really good thing. Some AI products will very confidently say, they'll just make a whole bunch of assumptions and won't ask you questions. Claude Desktop is not the only one that will ask you questions. But anyway, let's actually go back to the prompt a little bit. So in this example, we're creating a new way to collect decimal data. We're using a vertical thermometer slider to make it much easier and more visual to confirm that something in the range of expected data is actually being recorded. There's some details about the specifics of the user interface, and even if you aren't conversant in these details, Claude and similar products can help you come up with a plan, which we'll also discuss. Some details I will call out. I've asked it to generate a local preview for instant testing. So we'll be able to test in the browser before we've even tested inside a SurveyCTO form. And I've also asked it to create a form to help us with testing this plugin. So that's important context for understanding this. So what use case should the default threshold be? Let's go with body temperature. Sounds good. I'll build this thermometer style decimal field plugin. A couple of things on material for this. How it should be configured. So parameters are like settings for plugin. I'm going to say I want options, so I'll pick parameters. All right, so now Claude sort of acknowledges. By the way, you can sort of click into various aspects of the activity log. Often what you'll see is code. Personally, I'm not a developer myself, so this doesn't mean that much to me either. But Claude will always explain things as part of the main log in plain English to you that you understand. You might also, from time to time, see little errors. So the script might have red in the background, but in my experience, Claude is smart enough to resolve these. Just going over this process yesterday, it quickly turned red to black with one of these results cards. But anyway, let's discuss the right-hand panel of the desktop interface too. So Claude will actually, in the co-work mode, will create a to-do list that'll create project milestones, and you can see it make progress through these, which is a very helpful and reassuring piece of feedback. Inside the working folder, you'll see the files that Claude creates. So because field plugins are essentially little web applications, eventually you'll see an HTML, a CSS, and a JavaScript application file appear here. And here we have the context. Context is pretty important too. Context will list all of the installed resources that Claude Desktop is leveraging at that given point in time. So if you hadn't explicitly used the / command to say use the skill and you relied on Claude's ability to determine that, you'd know if it was successful here. It's a very important part of this. So Claude is going to be busy for a little while. So what we're actually going to do, a little bit like a cooking TV show, is move to our next recipe and come back. You can create parallel sessions. So let's go back to the co-work menu, and I'm going to click on New Task. Even better, in this view, we can see that there's an active task going in the background. So let's try our next prompt. So I'm just going to replace the suggestion. So like I did before, I'm going to try to be sort of explicit about the skill. To be clear, I'm just being cautious because this is a live demo and we want to show you a reliable result. We've not had a lot of problems with Claude not knowing what the skill is and to use it. So in this case, I'm focused only on a form. We're going to build a form consisting of about 10 fields. It's a clinical screening form. We're going to ask for demographics. There are various sort of variable types that I'm asking for. I'm asking to use validation. I'm asking to use, at the end, a logical referral routing system based on the info that's gathered in the form. So in other words, these are probably enough moving parts that a pure beginner at SurveyCTO may not automatically know how to do this. But what they can do is explain what they want in words to an AI in a desktop tool like Claude and get a good result. So let's get this one queued up too. I will click to get this started. And essentially the same process will happen. Claude will sort of think about it. If it needs to ask a question, it will ask that question. And all of the details on the right-hand panel that we discussed will be put in place.
While we're waiting for the Claude output, I wonder if we could turn to answer some questions that have come through.
Sure, absolutely. We'll also track progress from the sky here. We can see that our plugin has been going for about 6 minutes. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get some questions going.
So there are a couple of foundational ones regarding whether or not people need to use the paid subscription of Cowork or Codex to use the skill.
An excellent question.
Maybe I can jump in on that one, just because I'm following the chat while Amric's been very kindly giving this great demo. Artie, to your question and to kind of an umbrella set of questions related to this, part of the distinction of what we control and provide and what we don't is this skill architecture. And so this skill can be used by many agents. And those agents can be built, hosted, and the terms can be changed by the people who build those agents. So I think right now it might be the case that you have to use a paid tier of Claude to have access to this capability, although I'm not sure. But I think more generally, whether you're talking about enterprise organizations that pay to have their own AI models and agents built and spun up, or whether you prefer to use open source agents or something other than Codex or Cowork, what we've created here is kind of a package of skill that is transferable across all of these media. So we won't always know, frankly, given that Claude is probably the leader in the market right now. We happen to kind of be demoing it, but we won't always know the parameters and the constraints and the pricing models of all of the agents. And in fact, many of them will be proprietary or free or owned by organizations or individuals, et cetera. So I would leave that question to the specific agent, owner, host, provider, et cetera, not because we can't answer that today in specific, but because part of this delineation is that we don't control that and we don't plan to have the skill be agent specific, and therefore we don't endeavor to kind of control that.
And I will just add, I myself tested on the free version of Claude Cowork a couple weeks ago, granted, but still pretty recently, and I was able to use the skill and MCP server quite nicely. Well, since the plugin has completed, why don't we return back to the demo?
Sounds good. So yeah, so it was, I think, a little over 6 minutes, and Claude has coded a full field plugin. So just for comparison, I mean, in my sort of experience working with developers, depending on your concept, a plugin might take anywhere between, let's say, 4 hours for something truly tiny and trivial, and then tens of hours for something complex with many parts to test. So this probably isn't that extreme necessarily. But anyway, it's always important to check your output. You could just jump towards the files and start testing, and you'll certainly learn that way, but Claude might provide some helpful advice about what to do. So it seems to feel that everything is correct. Although, as you can see, it actually hasn't checked off but itself. It is waiting for some input. So there is a preview file that we will test, and we will also deploy this. It's also sort of explained to me what how the parameterization works. If this looks like scary code, don't worry. It's actually really not that complicated. It is a comma-separated list that's in single quotes. We just haven't read the instructions yet. Okay, so let's scroll down. Let's start with that test. So I'm going to quickly open the folder, and we will move back to the browser for a moment to see how this works. Okay, all right. So here we are with the browser. So what's happened here is Claude has compiled the plugins code into an HTML file to allow me to do some testing. I could click to add a value. Look, well, that looks great. I can slide my mouse cursor up and down, and the same should also work on Android when we tested it. But just keep in mind that is definitely one of the pieces of testing that you should do when you are sort of configuring plugins. If your target environment is Android, this is encouraging, but you still want to test on the devices that the people who will use the plugin will be using. Okay, so great. That's really promising. Let us go to a SurveyCTO server. So we're going to drop our files in and deploy these. So let's just get that folder open quickly. So the pieces that I'm dropping in are a form design in XLS format, and I'm dropping in this zip file. This is how field plugins are packaged. Those files are just zipped together, and there's a convention on how to name them. But of course, Claude knows all of that. Go ahead.
Emric, quick confirmation. The test form and the field plugin, both of those were outputs that Claude just gave to you, correct?
Yes, exactly. I haven't hidden a perfectly built plugin and personally coded form somewhere to make this sort of any smoother. This is all Claude's output based on my prompt, guided by the skill. So let's deploy this. Excellent. So the form is valid, which and if you've coded forms in Excel, you'll know that there are many things that could trip it up. None of that happened, thanks to the structure that the MCP tools provide. When I click on the test button, we go into SurveyCTO's web form testing view, which is very much like web forms. I'll click on next. Let's have a look. Amazing. It works. And all I did, I mean, honestly, working on that prompt, preparing it for the demo, probably took a few minutes to write and think about the content and get a little bit of feedback. Also, for those of you who do pursue this, it's helpful to know about the field plugin testing console. It is a developer-facing tool, essentially, but you could make changes to parameters. If you started to get more confident, you could tweak a bit of code and then reload, etc. But it is a very nice way to interact with field plugins. But here we have our thermometer. That's great. And now let's say our enumerators during the clinic audit get sort of immediate feedback, and they start anticipating what is going to happen with this patient, and that's great. All right, so let us head back to Claude Desktop. We will have a look at our other project. Right, here's our clinical screening form design. That was finished also and not so long. We will just quickly have a look at the output. Yeah, just briefly, doesn't seem like it's flagging any concerns. Great, so again, I'm going to click on the button and let's have a look together. I'm going to quickly change my share once more. So granted, I'm sure not all of you have designed forms in this environment, but for those who do, you can see that this also uses our template. The conditional highlighting is there. If you were to continue to make tweaks, you would be able to do that in a familiar environment. And just briefly having a look at this, all of this looks great. I don't see any sort of flags or reasons to be concerned that this wouldn't work. So let's deploy it immediately and try it. Let's go back to the browser. So we want to get back to our server console. That was our plugin test. So I'm going to deploy this here. Same procedure, upload from form definition. And I'll drop that in. And let's deploy. Okay, great. Form is valid. No errors again, thanks to MCP. And again, we click on the test view. So you might not capture details in exactly the same way, but keep in mind, I gave a very vague, high-level prompt. You can be super specific in your designs. You could have dropped in a Word doc, a PDF with really precise specifications as opposed to this very directional and simple request. So here is an example of where our thermometer would have been great, right? Much nicer to slide to find the right number than dealing with that. I'm just going to jam a number. Great. So it followed my instructions. We have really nice constraints. It was doing that well. Again, I'm just going to jab it some numbers. Okay. Again, it's holding me to account. Those of you in public health will know whether Claude's thresholds are actually any good. I'll pick some symptoms. Now, this is a common contradiction. You generally shouldn't select none of the above. Great. So Claude even did that. It picked up on that and prevented that illogical combination of answers. And here we get our emergency referral results. So I would say that was actually a really good form. That was a very good job, Claude, with the thanks of the SurveyCTO skill. So just very briefly, we'll have a look at the last example, which is a relatively quick one. I think you'll find that with short forms, translations are very quick to generate. So I'll go new task. Here's our prompt for the last example. And this time I'm going to drag and drop a field. And like I was saying about PDFs and Word files, whatever context that you want to provide Claude that will help it do a better job, just drop it in with your prompt. So let's go. We'll let this churn along for a little bit. But the possibilities are expansive. This demo has just been a few examples. The AI skill in MCP can help you create field plugins as part of complex, multi-form, multi-dataset workflows for a range of use cases. If you are newish to SurveyCTO, if you have learning gaps, if you've always wanted to know how case management works, tell Claude to build you a case management system. One that meets your specific specifications. If you have forms that are designed by former colleagues or more advanced colleagues who don't always have time to spend with you, take those forms, share them with Claude, ask questions, learn about SurveyCTO in practice through teardowns. Great, and Claude is asking us helpful questions, so perhaps we'll go with option 3, and I'll go with Claude's recommendation. Yes, go ahead.
Just looking at the time, I wonder if it might be helpful to maybe resume the rest of the webinar deck and then hopefully have time to show everyone the final translated result.
Sounds good.
But Amric, can you quickly go over some best practices?
Oh, sure. So this first point is sort of, it has beginners in mind in part. We definitely recommend using smart, long thinking models like Opus. Transparently, these models are more expensive, they consume more tokens, but most importantly, they do a better job. On average, you will spend actually less time and money on hard, difficult tasks with a capable model than using a fast, cheap model just because it feels like you're being more cost efficient. AI is a really helpful thought partner to you. So please don't just bring your prompt and idea and just hit enter and let it do its thing. Ask it to ask you questions. You probably know the answers. You're probably just not thinking of them. Get it to stress test your plans. and ask it to break down your plans into a set of achievable, testable milestones that you as a non-developer could actually test and confirm. And that links to my next point. If you aren't a developer and you're building code with AI, build in steps. Build in steps that you can test. This will give you a greater appreciation for how things were created, and give you the confidence over time that this is something that people in your organization who work in the field could reliably use, that they're not going to have some terrible edge case bug or issue that you hadn't found because you were so impressed at the job that Claude did initially. The last part, this is a long-term thing that will grow with your experience, but it's also part of your organizational strategy. You all work at different organizations with different goals, and you all do different jobs, and AI can help with all of that. But as I was saying earlier, it's a generalist. So you can provide tools like Claude's desktop with starting context at the system level. Claude uses a convention called Claude MD files, which are the instructions that say, this is how I like things. So you could think of the skill as how SurveyCTO works, the MCP as standards and quality control, and how to, and you can think of your Claude MD or whatever sort of system instructions you provide AI with who I am, how I like things, how I want things to look. If I ask you to do this, do that, and you'll get so much more out of these tools when you do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Amric. And Lawrence, on to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shirley. And thank you, Amric. That was awesome. And I see that a lot of people in the comments are as impressed as I am, even seeing it for not the first time. This is just such a cool capability. We're at such an exciting time in terms of technology. And I really just want to talk about our broader approach, not just to AI, but to the approach that we as a team, as an organization, have had to technology and how we bring technology to our users. And some of you may be familiar with our language of principled innovation, but we really want to drive innovation, but with specific goals in mind. And some of those goals revolve from our founding around data security and quality, making sure that we are providing powerful tools for keeping all of our subjects' data safe, all sensitive kind of important information safe. Expanding usability, making sure the benefits of technology are making its way to the entire world, to users everywhere we can. A lot of you work in places where you're collecting information on or serving people who often don't have the benefit of technology. And we love being a part of making that more widely available. And then really kind of bringing new functionality. In this case, it's the power of AI. In the past, has been other technology, but bringing that to the field. And so to us, as we think about our AI roadmap, we're going to continue following this pattern. And with how quickly AI technology moves, the specific roadmap may change. But I just want to really ensure everyone and give you a framework for thinking about this, which is that we are going to prioritize data security and quality first and foremost. We are consistently going to try to improve usability of existing functionality. This is a great example of that, right? This AI skill really allow agents to demystify and speed up the learning curve for new SurveyCTO users. I'm sure we'll also see really, really ingenious creative uses of it from our power users, which we've always seen with new technology. And then the third leg here is really bringing more power of AI technology to the field, adding more and more functionality to our platform and putting it in your hands so that you can do your work and serve your users. So that's kind of the broad perspective I want us to take on this roadmap, and I want to share with you kind of how we as a team think about it. I'll go into each in a little bit more detail. Building data security and data quality is something we've always done. And we've done it even when it makes our work challenging, sometimes even when it makes your work challenging. A lot of the features we've developed would be a lot easier without supporting end-to-end encryption. Our storage would be a lot cheaper if it didn't have to be able to handle totally opaque blobs, but we prioritize that level of data security. You've seen data quality tools throughout our platform, built into the collection step, built into the analysis step, even built into how the mobile app works and the ability to collect paradata, sensor data that is not sensitive but still useful for quality checking. These are all really, really nuanced and deeply technical capabilities that we want to leverage to maintain data security and data quality. One thing I want to highlight as it comes to AI is, some of you who have tinkered with vibe coding may recognize that using the SurveyCTO skill looks a lot like vibe coding. And in a lot of ways it is. You use natural language, Amric generated a form and a plugin in almost no time. But I think there's a really good distinction between vibe coding on platforms like SurveyCTO that provide you this functionality and use Gen AI to allow non-technical users to do really powerful things versus vibe coding from scratch. You guys may have followed headlines and seen some horror stories about kind of bespoke vibe coded tools having huge security gaps or sharing API keys that shouldn't have been made public, and the folks who created the initial tool having huge bills, et cetera. I think a big part from our perspective of maintaining data security and quality is making sure our platform always does that so that anything that builds on top of our platform benefits from that. But then putting tools in front of you that are cognizant of those limits and are designed to kind of protect our users. And I think on both levels, this skill is a great example of that. So we're really proud of it, and that's going to stay front and center for us. And then in terms of expanding usability, we see this, as you saw from the beginning timeline, as part of the progression of technology in field tools and data collection in research. And you've seen multiple ways just now in this demo that I think the tool really helps that. Democratizing survey design. Many of you know how challenging it is to create a good instrument, whether it's a objective one, whether it's one that has all of the right constraints to make sure the data collected is of good quality, whether it's playing nicely with previous instruments so that you have longitudinal views of the data, whether it's playing nicely with other tools that you're pushing that data into, whether it's visualizations or your own databases for other tracking purposes. And I think this skill really massively enables all of that. It speeds it up, makes it easier to test, allows more people to do it. Obviously, the speed also translates to rapid deployment. And I think you'll see, even with the current version of the skill, but certainly as models get more powerful, as our skill improves, I think the ability of the skill to not only function at the form and workflow level, but really to step back and help you think about your entire organization's stack and data flow, and helping to leverage data sets, define data sets, draw connections between forms and data sets, but maybe even leverage the API to push data in and out of SurveyCTO entirely. Our goal is really to continue to push the boundaries of expanding usability. And then finally, kind of the culmination of all this, or really kind of the result of all of this, is bringing this really powerful technology to the field to benefit you guys, to benefit the people you work with and for, and whether that's easier respondent experiences, more plugins, powerful, high quality workflows, or just increasing the range of what you can do. So I'll pause there. I know that we've come right up against time, but we'd love to field questions from you guys, hear feedback. We're seeing a lot in the chat. We're really excited about this technology in general and what we've already been able to do with it, and you'll certainly be seeing more from us. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or feedback, we'd love to chat now.
Yes, I think we can kind of take a couple of questions that I think are worth everyone hearing the responses for. But for the others, we will be putting this in an FAQ document that we will send out with the recording and slides. But I wanted to have us call out a couple of questions related to whether or not when we update the skill in GitHub, do people using the skill need to manually update it on their end, or will it automatically update?
That is a really good question. Deleting is actually a redundant step. So when you're managing a skill, there is a three-dot context menu. You can just use the replace option inside that menu to seamlessly update. So yeah, there's no risk of sort of polluting or mixing skills. Yeah, but yes, following the GitHub page is definitely the mechanism to be aware of when things change.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Patrick has also asked, he's benefited a lot from our support team, particularly around field plugins. And because people can now create plugins using this skill, how does our team support with troubleshooting issues with user-generated apps? And I would just say that it's great that you have been able to create these apps using this skill, but iterating and improving the plugins with the skill is also something that the agent is very well equipped to do. So you should be able to troubleshoot those issues conversing with the agent. But we recognize that, maybe sometimes it's a little bit complex. And even with conversing with the skill, you just can't get the plugin quite right. And in those situations, you can always reach out to our team to commission us to create or improve a plugin on your behalf.
I see one question that's been asked 3 times, once in the Q&A and twice in the chat. So maybe we can address that one too. I think it's variations of, can the skill help me turn a paper survey or a Word doc survey into the XLS forms? In short, yes, it can. And then the other one, I think, Thomas, you asked, if there's specific questions you want to include. The interface that Amrik demoed is sort of the best of both worlds between a project and a chatbot. And it has that capability where you could, for example, drop in a paper survey and say, please add a question about X. Or you could give the slightly ambiguous prompt that Amrik did to show off how smart that skill is, and then also say, make sure you include this type of question with these types of answers. So it is able to take different varying levels of specificity in terms of its prompt, even varying levels of input modality, and still work with that to generate the form in a very similar way to what you saw demoed. So I just wanted to address that, since I think it came from a few different folks.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. And actually, that's a good segue into this last slide here, which is that really try to push the boundaries of what the agent can do. AI agents, LLMs today are really smart, and they would probably be able to handle more than you think it can. And so we hope this demo just gives you an idea of all the possibilities you can do. We ran out of time to show you the final translated form, but it can do that as well. So, this skill is still in public beta. We welcome any feedback you might have, right? If you've built something that you're excited about, tag us on LinkedIn. If you have feedback to share, email us, or if you're familiar with it, use the issues tab in our GitHub repository.